Welcome to Sarah Wood's Tale, where stories comes alive. Please do well to hit that subscription button and turn on your notification bell for subsequent stories. The rain fell like a curtain, thick and cold, as Fred Kingston stepped out of his black SUV. His shiny shoes sank into the muddy ground, but he didn't care. He had come a long way, leaving behind his glass tower in Lagos, the boardroom meetings, the empire he had built with stone-cold precision. He was here for one thing, to bury the woman he once called his wife, Grace. They hadn't spoken in years. The divorce was never official, just distance and silence that grew over time. Now, she was gone. Just like that. Fred looked around. The graveyard was small and quiet, hidden in a forgotten village hours from the city. There were only a few people standing near the grave, most of them locals, old women with headscarves, men in worn-out shirts. A young pastor in a soaked robe was speaking softly. "We commit Grace's body to the earth, dust to dust." Fred didn't hear the rest. He couldn't. The rain washed over him, but it couldn't wash away the guilt growing in his chest. He stood alone, holding a black umbrella. His assistant, Peter, was behind him, quiet as usual. When the ceremony ended, people started leaving in twos and threes, whispering to each other as they passed Fred. He knew they recognized him, the famous Fred Kingston. But they didn't greet him. They just nodded and moved away. Fred remained still. Then he noticed him. A boy. Tall for his age, maybe 17, wearing an old gray hoodie and torn jeans. He stood right in front of the fresh grave, eyes fixed on the wet soil, hands clenched into fists. Fred watched him closely. There was something familiar in the way the boy stood. His jawline. His dark eyes. The boy looked up and noticed Fred. Their eyes locked. For a moment, time stopped. The rain, the wind, everything faded. Then the boy walked toward him slowly, water dripping from his hair. He stopped just a few steps away and said quietly, "She said you'd come too late." Fred's heart skipped. "What?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "She waited," the boy said, eyes sharp but filled with pain. "She waited for you, until the very end." Before Fred could respond, the boy turned and walked away, disappearing behind the trees at the edge of the cemetery. Fred stood frozen, the words echoing in his mind. "She said you'd come too late." The next morning, Fred sat in his luxurious penthouse office in Lagos, but his mind was still at that grave. He tried to focus on the laptop in front of him, but the boy's face kept flashing in his head. He looked like Grace. But there was something else. Something that felt even closer. He slammed the laptop shut and leaned back, sighing. Peter walked in, holding a tablet and a steaming cup of black coffee. "Meeting with the investors has been moved to 3, Peter said calmly. "Also, your speech at the new mall's opening is being printed." Fred didn't respond. Peter noticed. "Is everything all right, sir?" Fred stood and walked to the window. The city stretched below him, cars, people, buildings. It was all so far away from that small grave, from that boy. "I need to ask you something," Fred said slowly. Peter tilted his head. "Yes, sir. Do you remember if Grace ever tried to contact me?" Peter's expression froze for a second. I don't think so," he replied quickly. "You two hadn't spoken in years." Fred narrowed his eyes. "She wrote me letters. I never got them." Peter looked away. "Maybe they were lost. You get hundreds of mails. Most never reach your desk." Fred turned sharply. "She was my wife, Peter. My wife. Someone should have told me she was sick." "I didn't know she was ill," Peter said softly. "Nobody informed us." Fred stared at him, then turned back to the window. "And that boy," he added, almost to himself. "He said, she waited for me." Peter stayed quiet. "I need to know who he is," Fred said, his voice firm now. "Something tells me he's more than just a neighbor or a friend." Peter shook his head. "Fred, you don't need to get involved. It's the past. You've built a life here. There's no use reopening old wounds." Fred looked at him, his voice cold. "I buried my wife yesterday, Peter. I never said goodbye. And now there's a boy who looked me in the eye and blamed me." He paused. "I have to know." Later that day, Fred was back on the road. He told his driver to head back to the village. Peter tried to protest, but Fred had already made up his mind. The rain had stopped, but the village was still soaked in sadness when they arrived. Fred got out and walked straight to the small church where the funeral had been held. Inside, the young pastor was wiping down wet benches. He looked up and seemed surprised. Mr. Kingston. Fred nodded. Do you know the boy who stayed after the funeral yesterday? The pastor hesitated, then nodded. Yes, that's Alex. Grace's son. Fred's chest tightened. Her son. The pastor looked at him carefully. Yes, she raised him alone. Everyone here knows that. She was a wonderful mother. Fred took a deep breath. Where's his father? The pastor looked away for a moment. She never said. But most people assumed it was you. Silence filled the church. Fred sat down slowly, the weight of the truth hitting him. He's my son, he whispered. The pastor gave a small nod. It's not my place to say. But they struggled. She was sick for a long time, but she kept going for Alex. She loved him more than anything. Fred leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. How could I not know? The pastor looked at him kindly. Maybe you weren't ready to see. Back outside, Fred walked toward Grace's old house. It was small, quiet, and slightly run down. A neighbor pointed him to the backyard, where a tall woman was hanging clothes. She turned when she saw him. It was Esther, Grace's best friend. Her face hardened. What do you want? I just want to talk, Fred said. You're 10 years too late for talking, Fred Kingston, she snapped. She cried every night, waiting for your call. Fred swallowed hard. I didn't know. Don't say you didn't know, Esther interrupted, her voice trembling. She sent you letters. She tried everything. But you shut her out. He looked down. I saw the boy, he said. Alex. He's mine, isn't he? Esther sighed and turned away. He is. Fred closed his eyes for a moment. Why didn't she tell me directly? She tried. But every time she reached out, your assistant blocked her. She once told me, Fred doesn't want anything from the past. After that, she stopped trying. Fred felt sick. I want to see him, he said. Esther looked at him, eyes full of pain. You think you can just walk in and be his father now? He's 17. He grew up watching his mother die slowly. You weren't there. I know, Fred said quietly. But I want to be now. Esther looked at him for a long time, then shook her head. He doesn't want your money. He doesn't want your house. He just wants to know why you never came. Fred couldn't answer. Because he didn't know either. Fred returned the next morning, this time without his driver or Peter. He walked alone down the dusty path that led to Grace's old house. The sun was rising gently over the hills, but the warmth in the air didn't reach his heart. His chest was heavy, his mind full of questions. Esther was in the kitchen, washing vegetables in a bowl. She looked up when Fred walked in without knocking. You again, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. What more do you want? Fred stood quietly for a moment. Please, I just need to understand. Esther sighed and looked at him closely. Understand what, Fred? That she loved you until the day she died. That she raised your son alone. That she kept hoping you'd come back even when her body was giving up. Fred's face twisted in pain. I didn't know she had my child, Esther. I swear. You should have known, she said sharply. You left her, and then you never looked back. She was scared. Alone. But she didn't want your pity. She wanted you to care. Fred stepped closer. I didn't mean to abandon her. I didn't know how to face her after everything that happened. Esther gave a bitter laugh. You think she wasn't scared? You two loved each other once, Fred. Deeply. But when the stress started, your business, the fights, the distance, you let her go. I thought she moved on, Fred said softly. She stopped calling, stopped writing. I assumed she wanted nothing to do with me. She never stopped writing, Esther said, her voice shaking. She wrote you dozens of letters. Every month. Every birthday of Alex. When he got sick, when he passed exams, when he cried for a father he didn't know. Fred's eyes widened. Letters. Esther nodded. Yes. And every one of them came back. Returned. Unopened. Fred rubbed his forehead, guilt swelling inside. Peter, my assistant. He must have blocked them. She told me once, Esther said. She said, maybe Fred built his walls too high, maybe he can't hear me anymore. Fred lowered his eyes, ashamed. She loved you, Esther whispered. But more than that, she needed you. And you were nowhere. Tears filled Fred's eyes. Did she hate me in the end? No, Esther said quietly. She forgave you before she died. But she never stopped wishing, just once, you'd come back. Fred sat down on the wooden chair, his hands trembling. Can I see where she lived? Where Alex grew up? Esther looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to a small hallway and opened a door. This was her room, she said softly. Fred entered slowly. The room was small but clean. A faded curtain fluttered in the window. There was a single bed, a tiny table, and an old bookshelf filled with children's books and framed photos. One photo caught Fred's eye. Grace, smiling softly, holding a toddler, Alex, on her lap. His heart clenched. She was happy, he whispered. She made herself happy, Esther replied. Because she had to. Fred walked toward a small wooden drawer beside the bed. He opened it and stopped. Dozens of envelopes, neatly tied with a ribbon. Fred stayed at the stack of envelopes. His name was written on each one in Grace's neat handwriting. Some looked old and yellowed, others were more recent. Each one was marked Return to Sender. His hands trembled as he untied the ribbon and picked one. August 18th, 2010. He opened it slowly, the paper soft from time. Dear Fred, today Alex took his first steps. He kept falling, but every time he got up, he smiled at me like he knew he could do it. I wish you had seen it. He has your determination. He looks just like you when he's trying hard not to cry. I hope you're doing well. I still think about you. Maybe that's foolish, but I do. I just wanted to tell you, your son is beautiful. Fred folded the letter, his eyes burning. He picked another. March 22nd, 2014. Fred, Alex is sick. High fever for days now. The clinic says he'll be fine, but we're running out of money for medicine. I tried calling. I don't know if you changed your number or just blocked me. Please, if you get this, help us. Even if you hate me, don't let our son suffer. Fred clenched the letter tightly. He had been in Dubai at the time, launching a new hotel. He remembered feeling unusually restless that week. Now he knew why. He read another. October 12th, 2016. Fred, Alex turned 9 today. He asked me why he doesn't have a dad. I told him you were busy, that you were important, that one day, you'd come. I hope I didn't lie to him. He made you a birthday card too. I kept it, just in case you ever show up. I still believe you're a good man, Fred. I just hope one day, you'll believe that too. Tears ran down Fred's cheeks. He wasn't even trying to stop them now. He sat on the floor of the small room, surrounded by letters full of love, pain, and hope. Letters he never opened. Words he never read. Years of silence that could have been broken. He stayed there for hours, reading one after another. Letters about Alex's school, his favorite color, the time he won a quiz in class, how he once cried because he was bullied for not having a father. Every letter stabbed deeper. Fred felt like he was drowning in shame. At last, Esther knocked gently on the door. You okay? She asked. He looked up at her, eyes red. Why didn't she stop writing? Because she never stopped believing in you, Esther said. Fred held the last letter, unopened. June 3rd, 2023, just a month before she died. He opened it slowly. Fred, this might be my last letter. The doctors say I don't have much time. I'm tired, Fred, but I'm not scared. Alex is the strongest boy I know. He won't show you, but he's hurting. He needs you, even if he won't say it. I want you to forgive yourself, Fred. And if you ever come here, please don't just visit my grave. Find him. Hold him. Tell him he's not alone. I love you. I always did. Grace. Fred stared at the letter for a long time. Then he stood. I need to see him, he said. Esther nodded. I'll tell him you're looking for him. But don't expect him to be happy. He has every right to be angry. I know, Fred said. But I'm not walking away this time. Fred stood silently outside the small government school, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets. Children laughed and ran across the courtyard, but his eyes searched for one face, Alex's. The boy finally appeared, walking with his backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked like Grace, his sharp cheekbones, the stubborn tilt of his chin, even the way his eyes narrowed at the sun. Fred stepped forward. Alex. Alex froze. You again. I'm not here to bother you. I need to talk. I told you before, I don't want to talk to you. I know. And I understand, Fred said quickly. But I can't walk away without knowing the truth. The truth. Alex narrowed his eyes. I need to know if you're really my son, Fred said, his voice trembling. Not because I doubt it, but because I need to face it. Properly. Completely. Alex looked at him coldly. So now you want a DNA test? After all this time? Fred nodded. Yes. Not because I don't believe it, but because I need to hold that paper in my hand and know I failed something real. Alex dropped his gaze for a second. You don't need a paper to tell you that. I know, Fred whispered. But I still want to try. Just one test. That's all I'm asking. And then what? Alex said bitterly. You'll throw some money at me and go back to your mansion. Fred shook his head. No. I just want to take responsibility, however I can. I know I can't fix the past, but maybe I can do something with the truth. Alex stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. Fine. One test. But it won't change anything. Fred nodded. Thank you. 3 days later, Fred paced the hospital corridor nervously. The DNA test had been done. All he had to do now was wait for the results. His heart thudded in his chest. Dr. Wilson finally walked out, a large envelope in his hand. Mr. Fred Kingsley, he asked. Yes, Fred replied, stepping forward. These are the DNA results, the doctor said, handing over the envelope. Fred hesitated, then opened it with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the words quickly. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. He froze. He had a son. Fred staggered back into the waiting chair, the paper still clutched in his hands. For a long time, he said nothing. The words blurred with tears in his eyes. Alex was his son, his flesh, his blood, a living part of Grace. All those years lost, birthdays missed, first words, first steps, school achievements, all gone. Gone. Fred leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the paper trembling between his fingers. Guilt stabbed deep into his heart. A moment later, he heard footsteps. Alex walked into the waiting area, hands in his pockets, expression blank. Well, he asked. Fred looked up slowly. It's true. I told you it would be. I just needed to see it with my own eyes. Alex sat across from him. So, now you believe me. What's next? Gonna take me to some mansion? Enroll me in a rich boys' school? Fred shook his head. I'm not here to take over your life, Alex. I know I have no right to. I missed too much. Too many years. Alex looked away. But if you ever want anything, need anything, I'm here, Fred continued. Not just with money. With time. With myself. You think it's that easy? Alex snapped. One piece of paper and suddenly you're my father. No, Fred said quietly. I don't expect that. I just want to start somewhere. Even if it's just standing nearby until you're ready. Alex's eyes hardened. You're not my dad. You're just a stranger with a title. Fred didn't respond. He simply nodded. You're angry, he said. And you should be. Alex stood up. Don't come looking for me again. He turned and walked away without another word. Fred watched him go, the DNA paper still clutched tightly in his hands. He is my son, Fred thought, and I'm the one who missed it all. That night, Fred sat alone in his study, a fire crackling in the fireplace. The DNA test lay on the table beside him. He hadn't stopped looking at it. Peter walked in quietly, unsure whether he was allowed to speak. Fred didn't look at him. It's true. Peter nodded. I figured. Do you know what it feels like? Fred asked, his voice low. To find out you have a son, and he wants nothing to do with you. Peter stayed silent. Fred picked up the photo of Grace from the mantelpiece. Her smile, soft, kind, and full of hope, felt like a knife now. She raised him alone, he whispered. And I was too proud, too blind to even read one letter. Peter stepped closer. Fred, Don't, Fred said sharply. Not tonight. He stood, walked to the window, and stared into the darkness. I'm going back to the village tomorrow, he said. Not to force anything. Just to sit by her grave. To talk. To tell her I saw him. And his beautiful. Peter nodded. Do you want me to come? No, Fred said. You've done enough. The next day, Fred stood by Grace's grave again. The wind was gentle. The sky was soft with morning clouds. He knelt, placed a single white rose on the headstone, and spoke softly. I saw him, Grace. Our son. His voice cracked. He looks like you. He's strong, smart, brave, and so angry. He has every reason to be. Fred swallowed the lump in his throat. I got the test. His mine. I know you always knew. I just wish I had believed you. I wish I had listened. He paused. I don't expect him to forgive me. Maybe he never will. But I want you to know, I'm not walking away again. Not this time. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I will earn him. One day at a time. However long it takes. Fred stood slowly, wiped his tears, and placed the DNA report beneath the rose on her grave. You gave me something beautiful, Grace, he whispered. Even if I don't deserve him. And then, quietly, he walked away, leaving behind the paper, the pain, and a promise in the wind. Fred stood at the edge of the school football field, watching the boys run laps. Alex was among them, his face focused, his legs quick. He looked strong, just like Fred once was at that age. Fred's car waited nearby, loaded with gifts. A brand new laptop, a custom football kit with Alex's name, expensive sneakers, and even an offer letter for full education sponsorship at one of the best schools in the capital city. When the whistle blew and practice ended, Fred walked over with a hopeful smile. Alex, he called gently. The boy stopped, wiped sweat from his forehead, and stared at Fred without a smile. I just came to see how you're doing, Fred said. And I brought you something. I don't need anything from you, Alex replied quickly. Fred hesitated. I know I wasn't there, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want to do something. Help with school, or maybe a better place to live. Alex looked away, jaw tight. Why now? Why after she's gone? I didn't know, Fred said quietly. Your mother tried, but you didn't listen, Alex interrupted. You didn't look. You didn't care. Fred opened the car door and brought out a large box. Here, these are just things you might like. Not to buy your love. Just, maybe a way to say I'm trying. Alex looked at the box for a long time. Then he stepped forward, closed it gently, and pushed it back. Where were you when we had no food? He asked, his voice rising. When she was coughing blood at night. When she begged me not to worry because Daddy might come someday. Do you know what that feels like? Fred lowered his head. No, I don't. She used to sit by the window every Sunday, Alex said, his voice breaking. She'd wait for you. Dress up a little. Hope maybe that day you'd appear. A few of the other boys watched quietly from a distance, sensing something serious. I didn't need a rich father, Alex said, backing away. I needed a present father. Fred tried to speak, but no words came. Only silence. I don't want your money, Alex said. I don't want a mansion or fancy shoes. You had a family, and you didn't care until she was dead. That's not love. That's guilt. He turned and walked away. Fred watched him go, feeling smaller than he had in years. For the first time in his life, his billions meant absolutely nothing. Back at the mansion in the city, Fred sat on the edge of his bed, Grace's final letter still on the nightstand. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't think straight. Everything was falling apart inside him. At dawn, he walked out to the staff quarters, where Mrs. Bello, his longtime housekeeper, was boiling water for tea. Good morning, sir, she said, surprised to see him. Morning, he replied quietly. Can we talk for a moment? Of course, she said, wiping her hands and pulling out a plastic chair for him. Fred Saturday, Mrs. Bello, you knew Grace. She nodded slowly. Yes, I did. She tried to contact me, didn't she? Mrs. Bellow's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea into a cup. Yes, sir, she did. Fred leaned forward. Please, tell me the truth. Mrs. Bellow took a deep breath. A few months after you and Grace separated, she came to the gate one morning. She looked tired, pale. She begged me to let her speak to you. And you didn't? Fred asked. I wanted to. But Peter had given orders, she said, avoiding his eyes. No visitors from the past. No drama. Only focus on work. He said you were building something too important to risk distractions. Fred clenched his jaw. So what happened? I called Peter, she continued. He came out and spoke to her himself. I wasn't close enough to hear what he said, but when she left, she was crying. She never came back. Fred's chest tightened. And no one told me. Mrs. Bellow finally looked at him. We were all scared, sir. Peter made us believe you didn't want to be reminded of your old life. That Grace would only bring pain. Fred stood up, filled with fury. Thank you, he said stiffly. You've been loyal. I won't forget that. He stormed back into the house and pressed the intercom. Get Peter. Now. 10 minutes later, Peter walked in, still adjusting his tie. Morning, boss. You wanted. Sit, Fred said coldly. Peter paused, confused, then slowly Saturday. Did you block Grace from contacting me? Fred asked, his voice low. Peter's face shifted. Fred. Did you? Peter looked down. Yes. Fred closed his eyes for a moment. Why? You were building an empire, Fred. She was emotional, unpredictable. You were finally moving on. I didn't want her pulling you backward. She was my wife. Fred shouted. She was carrying my son. Peter stood now, his voice defensive. And you were drowning in stress. Every night you drank, you said you couldn't take more drama. I made a choice to protect you from something that could have destroyed you. You destroyed them instead. Fred barked. You kept a mother from a father, a son from his name. You let them suffer. Peter's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Fred walked up to him, fury in his eyes. Do you think I care about the company right now? About profits? Stocks? What good is it if I lost everything that mattered? I thought I was helping, Peter whispered. You helped me become a man I hate, Fred said. You're fired. Pack your things. You're done here. Peter looked shocked. Fred. Go. Fred roared. Peter turned and left without another word. Fred sat down, his hands shaking. The walls of his perfect world were crumbling around him, and he had no one to blame but himself, and the man he trusted most. He picked up Grace's last letter again. Her words echoed in his mind. If you ever come here, please don't just visit my grave. Find him. Hold him. Tell him he's not alone. I will, Fred whispered. I don't care how long it takes. I'll earn it. I'll earn him. The study was quiet. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and the fire in the fireplace gave a soft, warm glow. Fred sat at his desk, pen in hand, blank paper in front of him. He had tried to write for over an hour but didn't know where to begin. Finally, he took a deep breath and started. Dear Alex, I don't know if you will ever read this. I don't even know if I have the right to call you son. But I'm writing this because there are things I should have said a long time ago. I was angry when your mother left me. Too angry to see clearly. Too proud to ask why. And in that anger, I shut her out. I shut you out, before I even knew you existed. She tried to reach me. I know that now. She wrote letters. She asked people to help her call me. But I was too far away, behind walls I built myself. Grace was the best part of my life. And I let her go without a fight. That is my deepest regret. I met you. You stood at her grave like a soldier guarding someone he loved deeply. You reminded me of her, strong, silent, and full of fire. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope, I pray, that one day, you might give me a chance to be near you, to know you, even just a little. This isn't about money. I know it means nothing to you. And it shouldn't. What I want to give you can't be bought. I just want to give you, mere, whatever is left of me. If you read this, thank you. If you don't, I'll still keep hoping. With all the love I never got to give. Fred. Fred folded the letter carefully, placed it in a white envelope, and wrote Alex on the front. The next morning, he returned to the quiet village. The sky was pale and clouded. He knelt by Grace's grave and placed the letter under the small angel statue beside her headstone. He touched the stone gently. If he comes, let him read it, he whispered. Help him see my heart. Then he stood, turned around, and left, his heart heavy, but a little lighter than before. 1 week later, Fred was in the garden, watering the small plants Grace once loved. Peter came out of the house, looking surprised. Fred, he said, you have a visitor. Fred looked up. Who? Peter moved aside. Alex was standing behind him. In his hand was the letter. Fred froze. Alex walked forward slowly. His face was unreadable. I found your letter, he said quietly. At her grave. Fred swallowed hard. I didn't know if you'd see it. I wasn't planning to, Alex said. But I go there to talk to her. And I saw it. I read it. Fred waited, unsure what to say. Alex looked at the letter again. She forgave you. She never hated you. Even when she was sick, she used to say you were a good man who lost his way. Fred's throat tightened. She said that. Alex nodded. And I've been angry. Really angry. But, he paused. I'm trying to do the same. To forgive you. Fred's hands shook slightly. Thank you. I'm not saying everything is okay, Alex added quickly. But maybe we can talk. Sometimes. Fred nodded. Anything. Whenever you're ready. Alex looked around the garden. She used to love roses, he murmured. I know, Fred said softly. I started planting them again. They stood there in silence, both looking at the soil where new life was slowly beginning to grow. A few days later, Alex arrived at Fred's estate with just one bag. He stood in front of the massive gate, unsure if he was doing the right thing. Peter greeted him with a surprised smile. You really came, Peter said. I'm not moving in, Alex said quickly. I'm just staying a few days. Peter nodded. That's fair. Come on in. Fred met him at the entrance. Your room is ready. You can change anything you don't like. Alex shrugged. I'm fine. Fred smiled gently. All right. Let me show you around. The house was huge. High ceilings, wide halls, expensive furniture, and paintings on every wall. But it felt cold, like a museum. I don't like quiet, Alex said suddenly. Fred looked at him. Would music help? Alex nodded. Maybe. Fred handed him a remote. You choose. A few minutes later, soft hip-hop music filled the living room. It wasn't Fred's style, but he didn't mind. He watched Alex settle on the couch, feet tucked under him like he'd done it before. It made Fred smile. Over the next few days, their conversations were short at first, awkward, careful. Do you like basketball? Fred asked one evening. I play sometimes, Alex replied. We have a court outside. Alex raised a brow. You play? Fred laughed. Terribly, but I can try. Another time, Fred brought him to his office. This is where I run most of my businesses, Fred said. Alex looked around. You own all this? Fred nodded. Yes, but it means nothing if I have no one to share it with. Alex didn't respond, but he stayed a little longer in the office that day. One afternoon, Fred was teaching Alex about stocks and investments. You see, if you invest early and smartly, you can grow anything, Fred explained. Alex leaned in. So you don't just keep your money in banks? Fred laughed. No, money in banks sleeps. I like money that works. Alex smirked. That's kind of cool. Fred blinked. You think I'm cool? Alex shrugged. A little. Fred smiled wide. Later that night, Alex knocked on Fred's door. I found something in my mom's things, he said. He held out a small photo, an old one. It was of Fred and Grace, young and in love. She said you made her laugh more than anyone. Fred took the photo with shaking hands. I remember this day. We were at the beach. She made me chase a crab. Alex chuckled. She told me that story. Fred looked at him. Do you think you can tell me more about her? The parts one missed. Alex nodded slowly. Yeah, I can do that. And that night, they sat in the living room, talking about Grace, about her smile, her jokes, how she used to dance while cooking. For the first time, the house didn't feel so cold anymore. It felt like a home. A clumsy one. An uncertain one. But real. The morning sun cast a gentle glow over the sprawling gardens of Fred's estate. Birds chirped softly, and a light breeze carried the scent of blooming roses, Grace's favorite. Today was her birthday, a day that had always been filled with laughter and celebration. But now, it was a day of remembrance. Fred stood by the window of his study, gazing out at the horizon. In his hand, he held a small, velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant, a piece of jewelry that had once belonged to Grace. He traced the pendant with his thumb, memories flooding back. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his reverie. Come in, he said, turning to see Alex enter the room. Alex had been living at the estate for a few weeks now. Their relationship was still new, fragile, but each day brought them closer. Today, however, there was a solemnity in Alex's eyes. Morning, Alex greeted softly. Morning, Fred replied, offering a small smile. Sleep well? Alex shrugged. As well as I could. Fred nodded, understanding the weight of the day. It's her birthday. Alex looked down, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. Yeah. An idea had been lingering in Fred's mind, and now felt like the right time to voice it. I was thinking, Fred began cautiously, maybe we could visit her grave together today. Plant some flowers. She always loved gardens. Alex's eyes met Fred's, searching for sincerity. After a moment, he nodded. Okay, I think she'd like that. Relief washed over Fred. Thank you. Later that morning, The drive to the village was quiet, each lost in their thoughts. The village hadn't changed much since Grace's funeral, still quaint, still holding memories at every corner. They arrived at the cemetery, the wrought iron gate creaking as they entered. The path to Grace's grave was lined with wildflowers, swaying gently in the breeze. Standing before the headstone, Fred felt a lump form in his throat. The inscription read, "Grace Evelyn Thompson, beloved mother and friend, forever in our hearts." Alex knelt down, brushing away some leaves that had settled on the grave. "Hey, Mom," he whispered. "Happy birthday." Fred swallowed hard, his voice thick with emotion. "Happy birthday, Grace." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of loss pressing down on them. Fred cleared his throat. "I brought some flowers. Thought we could plant them together." Alex looked at the small tray of rose saplings Fred had brought. A hint of a smile played on his lips. Roses. She loved roses. Fred nodded. She did. They worked side by side, digging small holes and placing the saplings gently into the earth. As they worked, memories surfaced. "She used to spend hours in the garden," Alex said softly. "Even when she was tired, she'd be out there, tending to her plants." Fred smiled wistfully. "I remember. She said it was her therapy." Alex chuckled lightly. "She tried to get me into it, but I was more interested in climbing trees than planting them." Fred laughed, the sound foreign yet comforting. "She always said you had too much energy." As they finished planting the last sapling, Fred wiped his hands on his jeans and turned to Alex. "There's something I want to give you," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the velvet box. Alex looked at it curiously. "What's that?" Fred opened the box, revealing the silver necklace. The pendant caught the sunlight, glinting softly. "This was your mother's," Fred explained. "She wore it every time she thought of us, of you and me." Alex's eyes widened, emotion flickering across his face. "I remember this. She used to hold it when she was deep in thought." Fred nodded. "She told me once that it reminded her of the love we shared, despite everything." He extended the box toward Alex. "I think she would want you to have it." Alex hesitated, his eyes welling up with tears. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Fred replied gently. "Just know that it's a piece of her, and now a piece of us." With trembling hands, Alex took the box, his fingers brushing against the cool metal of the necklace. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. "Thank you," he whispered. Fred placed a hand on Alex's shoulder, offering silent support. After a moment, Alex spoke again. "She forgave you, you know." Fred's breath caught. "She did." Alex nodded. "She always said that holding on to anger only poisons the soul. She wanted peace, for herself, for me, and for you." Fred looked away, blinking back tears. "I wish I could have told her how sorry I am, how much I still love her." Alex's voice was soft. "I think she knew." They stood there, the father and son, united in their grief and love for the woman who had shaped their lives. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the cemetery, Fred took a deep breath. "Alex," he began, "I know I can't change the past, but I want to be here for you now, in any way you'll let me." Alex looked at his father, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "I'd like that." Fred smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Me too." They left the cemetery together, the bond between them strengthened by shared memories and the legacy of a woman who had loved them both fiercely. As they walked back to the car, Alex clasped the necklace around his neck, the pendant resting over his heart, a tangible reminder of his mother and the new chapter he and his father were beginning together. Please don't forget to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe to get more interesting stories like this.